Welcome to all Caribbean entrepreneurs. If you've been ready and waiting to take your business digital and get paid online while you sip something strong on the beach, this podcast is for you. We'll hear from the Caribbean's finest entrepreneurs on topics like e-commerce, business development, brand building, social media, their wins and failures. This is the only place in the region helping you navigate the digital age from the Caribbean's perspective. This is Digipreneur FM. And now, let's give it up for the Digiboss himself, Mr. Karan Rose.
Thank you to everybody listening to another episode of the Digipreneur FM podcast. And as usual, it is your boy, Mr. Rose. DJ, as much as I love the music, can you fade us all the way out? Because we got to talk to the people. We got to talk to the people, DJ. So fade us all the way out. Fade us all the way out. Man, I'd be lying to you. Every single time I hear that trumpet start to blare and that intro music hit, I always get psyched up for another episode. You know, almost 2 years ago when I was going through the process of planning the podcast, right? Now, when I do things, I always have to find ways to get me excited about the things that I'm doing, right? And it could be the littlest things. So when I was planning the podcast, you know, the intro was a huge thing for me because I wanted to create an intro that every single time I personally heard it, it psyched me up to get ready to deliver the podcast. And so even just getting the intro right, finding the music, finding the right voice actor to deliver my script, putting it all together, finding all of that and then putting it together to create the intro that you hear every single podcast. It took some time. It took about a week, almost 2 weeks, to get it all done. But when it was done and when it was done right, like, listen, I just get so amped up and excited to deliver. And going on 2 years later, it still does that for me, right? And I spoke about this in one of the early episodes, and I did a whole live about it. It's on YouTube where I actually broke down the entire process of how I went about doing the intro, right? And again, it took some time because getting the music, I had to go to a few different producers to create the music. And then, yeah, I had to go and research and hunt for voice actors, both locally and internationally, who could just deliver in a way that I wanted it to be. And, you know, it was a process. But again, I say all that to say that hearing the intro always hypes me up. And, you know, anytime you're doing your content creation or you're doing your creative work, you know, always find a way to make it enjoyable for yourself because it just makes it so much easier. There are some times where I might do the podcast out of obligation to stick to my 2 episodes a week, and going into it, it might just feel like I'm just doing it as the obligation. And that's rare because I really do enjoy the podcast on the whole, but obviously we all have our off days. And I'm not lying to you. The minute I press the intro button and I hear that trumpet start, I'm like, all right, it's game time. Let's put our game face on and we start rolling and we get hyped up. And then I record my podcasts. You know, my podcasts are all recorded really, really early in the morning. Anywhere between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. is when I record every single podcast episode. You know, so You definitely have to, find that energy to wake yourself up and get into that mode to deliver your content, because ain't nobody trying to listen to no boring podcasts. Ain't nobody want to hear no podcast with no pizzazz, with no razzle dazzle. Oh man. So listen, let's get into today's episode, right? Today is January 26th, Thursday, January 26th, 2023, and it is episode 119. 119. It's amazing, man. It's amazing. We have published 119 episodes so far. We have over 20,000 downloads of the podcast, and you know what? And for that, we gotta get a bang, 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 connect. I thank everybody for the support over the last year and a half. Yeah, year and a half. We're going on 2 years in July. So thank you for all the support. It's really been good. So what are we here for today? What is today's podcast episode about? Today's podcast is about, can you make, hear me good, hear me well, can you make $100,000 a month as a solopreneur? My goodness, what a topic to start off early in 2023. Can you make $100,000 or more as a solopreneur? All right. And a solopreneur, if you guys don't know, is basically just somebody who is into this business by themselves. According to Oxford Dictionary, a solopreneur is a person who sets up and runs a business on their own. All right? A person who sets up and runs a business on their own. And this is a topic where over the years, I have always gotten from, good friends and folks around me that, hey, at some point, you need to build a team around you. You can't scale. You can't grow as a solopreneur. You can't make a lot of money as a solopreneur. And while the arguments are always compelling, and there's always, some good insight into why people say you can't grow as a solopreneur, the reality is that you always have to keep in mind that when people are telling you, about, why something can't happen or why you can't do something, whatever, you always have to bear in mind that people are viewing the situation from their lens, from their experiences, right? I'm not saying that they are wrong. I'm not saying that they are right. Just always keep in mind that everybody is viewing the situation from their lens. And they might be looking at it like they know they can't be a solopreneur and scale the business on their own for whatever the reason is, right? So I've always been told by people around me that, hey, you're going to have to build a team. You're not going to be able to do this on your own and whatnot. And the truth of the matter is, for me, is that I've tried to work with people over the years, and for one reason or the next, it just never worked out. And it forced me to learn a lot of the skills that I learn and utilize every single day, right? Forced me to learn a lot. It forced me to adapt. It forced me to find ways to create workflows and processes, get the right tools, set up the right automations, get the right softwares. It forced me to learn all of these things. That way, I can produce the content that I do. Force me to learn these processes that, allow me to work with the clients that I work with. And even if in the future I build that team around me and I'm no longer a solopreneur in a one-man band, I would have learned so much that even if I do something and I'm not great at it or amazing at it, I know enough to be dangerous. And I know enough to understand the role and function of the team members that I would be building around me. So it forced me to get that level of understanding. So again, even if in the future I'm no longer a solopreneur, that one-man band, when I start to build the team around me, I have a good idea as to what should be happening. There are always going to be people that are light years ahead of me, and that's great. But now when we're in a conversation to show me things, I have at least an understanding as to what is happening, right? So that is one thing that being a solopreneur has really, really helped me with. Now, the question of, can you make bank as a solopreneur? And this was a topic where I was kind of hemming and hawing. About doing. Because on one hand, I feel like, abroad, back in Canada, in the US, the UK, everybody is pretty much open about their earnings. Caribbean wide, earnings is taboo. You don't see anybody talking about it. And when you are looking at, business coaches, when you're looking at service providers, a lot of them abroad show income reports just to add to that credibility. All right? But Caribbean wide, we don't like to discuss money. Nobody really shows any sort of income reports. And a big part of it is, one, safety, for sure. I not gonna knock nobody on that. One part of it is safety. Just, making sure that, you keep a low enough profile. Nobody's really, able to watch you and pre you too hard. But then the other half of it is, there are a lot of businesses and business owners who are just not making good money. They're making enough to survive. They're making enough, to ensure that the lights are on, the bills are paid, but they're not really making bank. And not showing that or not talking about it allows them to keep up the fantasy and the fallacy that they are much bigger than they really are. Because if you were to know, if you were to learn how much they are making within their business, well, are you trying to learn about business from somebody who they themselves are struggling in their business? Are you trying to learn from a coach who they themselves are struggling? We have a lot of people who are talking a big game, whether it be business coaches, marketing coaches, branding coaches, mental health coaches, mindset coach. We have a lot of people who are talking a big game, but they are struggling in their own capacity within their niche. They are struggling in their own capacity within their niche, right? So you don't want to go and follow a business coach or a marketing coach or a mental health coach or a mindset coach who they themselves are struggling in the exact same thing that they are trying to sell to you and preach to you about. So because of that, you're never going to get people talking about their earnings or how much they made or showcasing an income report and things like that. It's just not going to happen, because the minute they do that, it just bursts your bubble and it bursts your confidence that they can take you to the next level, right? And I've realized that very, very early on. There is a lot of people who show up big on social media, but the minute you talk to them one-on-one, they're struggling. They're struggling. And it's very hard to hear your business coach, your mental health coach, your mindset coach, your marketing. It's very hard to hear that your coaches online, they're big, they're showing up big, they're showing up consistently, and they're trying to sell you the dream that they can take you to the next level, but they themselves are not generating money for their own business within their own niche, right? So that's why you don't really see it. So I was hemming and hawing about talking about this subject, but I feel like we need to see examples of the people who are thriving and how they are doing it so that it can spark the minds of those, and they can take bits and pieces and nuggets and add it to their own repertoire to help them on their journey. So that's where today's topic comes from. The road to 100K. Can you make $100,000 as a solopreneur? And I'm not talking gross. I'm not talking gross and then you got to deduct everything. And no, I'm talking profit. I'm talking after you done paid what you need to pay, your netting, your take home is over $100,000. And so my answer to that is yes, you can make $100,000 and more in profit as a solopreneur. And for the first time in my life, it's about to happen. For the first time in my life, it's about to happen. And because it's about to happen, it has given me so much perspective. There is a quote from Elon Musk where he says, "You are paid in provision to the value that you provide." Let me pull up the exact quote. This is the exact quote from Elon Musk. "You get paid in direct proportion to the difficulty of the problems that you solve." That's the exact quote. All right? You get paid in direct proportion to the difficulties of the problem that you solve. So obviously, the bigger the problems that you solve, the more value that you provide for somebody with the resources to pay you, is the more money that you are able to make. And I need you to let that sink in, because a lot of us are trying to solve minimal problems, small problems for people who cannot pay you the types of money that you would want to be paid. And we would argue back and forth, tooth and nail, that, businesses are cheap or business owners are cheap. But the problem that you were solving was never going to get you to the bag that you want to be paid. And you need to find the problems to solve for the right people to make the kind of money that you want. And this year, 2023, is the year where all of that has kind of really helped shape my perspective. And so, for the first time in my life, after, starting my business back in 2016, up until now, it took up until now to be able to put my name on a few documents that would put me over the 100K threshold. It is very possible to make 100K as a solopreneur. And so I was having a meeting with my lawyer. We went out to get some food, and we sat down and we were going over the various deals that we're signing off on. And we both just laughed because, these things, like, they take time to build, but then when it happens so fast. And then when it's in front of you and it's real, you're like, crap, this is actually happening. And so how did it happen for me? Now, this is a podcast where I have not scripted. I have not I have not wrote anything down, so I'm going off the hip. And I feel like now that I'm kind of breaking down, I want to give you how it's happening for me. I feel like, damn, I should have made my notes. But I will start off by saying how it's happening for me is through a ecosystem of products, services, brand positioning. It's happening through an ecosystem that is the digipreneur ecosystem. And it's taken a while to build it because you have to build yourself. You got to build your skill sets. You got to build your brand positioning. And then not everything that is accessible to me today was accessible, a year or two ago, right? There's levels to this stuff. And you have to constantly keep unlocking new levels. And so the starting point for me was the skills that I have learned and honed over the years. So some of the skills that I have been able to learn have been, and that have played a big part in what I do is web development, search engine optimization, becoming a digital strategist, becoming a content marketer and content creator, learning and honing copywriting skills, learning how to sell, learning how to manage my time, my projects, and learning about the various monetization strategies. Learning those skills have given me the base for every single thing that I do. I did not start off as somebody who came out to teach anybody about digital marketing or digital strategy. No, that was never the game. I've spoken about it in the past. You could check episode 1. I've done a couple of other episodes talking about, my starting point. But my starting point was being a tech blogger. Droid Island started off as a tech blog where we were educating about smartphones and how to use them. Tips, tricks, strategies for both personal and business use. And even being a mobile specialist, even being that took years because I was in mobile since I was 19. Since I was 19, I got my first gig at TELUS Communications back in Canada, working at Rogers Communications in Canada, working as a mobile specialist in Apple back in Canada. That was pretty much my 20s. That was pretty much my 20s. And it was a whole lot of being immersed in the smartphone industry for a number of years. For over 10 plus years, I was immersed in the smartphone industry. And I was constantly teaching and consulting and matching people up with the right devices and teaching them how to use it. So when I moved to Trinidad and I seen that gap, it made so much sense to start building my own name, my own brand, educating people about the smartphones and the smartphone industry and the tech industry from the Caribbean perspective because there was that gap. But because I was teaching, I had to learn, okay, when people do a Google search, how does somebody show up on Google? What are the things that you need? What are the strategies that you need to show up when people are conducting their searches? How does social media work? What are the types of content that do well on social media? How do I go about creating that type of content for social media? What do I say when I'm crafting a script or when I'm crafting the caption or when I'm making the blocks? What do I say? Now that, okay, I'm creating the content, how do I monetize this? What are the ways that talking about tech can make me money? And so all of the skills that I've learned over the years was to be a better tech blogger and then learning how I can talk about tech 24/7 and get paid to do it as for my career. So like I said, I never learned these skills to teach it to somebody. I learned all of these skills to build a business. And because you're constantly learning and experimenting within your business, you start to get to see what works, what doesn't work. You get to look at the results, good or bad. You're still getting results, but you're still practicing and you're still learning. And then it just got to the point where you're learning so much about business and digital strategy and all that good stuff. I felt like I was learning more about that than I was about smartphones. It got to that point. It got to that point where everything I was consuming was about online business and digital strategy and monetization. Then it was about smartphones. And then it all kind of came home when people started to ask me more about how I was building my business online than about the smartphones. So step one for me was learning those base of skills. Learning those base of skills. All right. The second step on this road to 100K, after learning those skills, and I'm not going to sit here and say that I've learned, learned. I'm always learning because things are always changing. And I'm always trying to stay up to date as much as possible because every day things are changing or new things are coming out and you're learning new things to create new processes and workflows, right? The second stage on that road to 100K was learning how to build a brand. How do you build your reputation? How do you build your reputation in the digital age? How do you build a brand where you are top of mind and people trust you? And that has been a exercise for me because I didn't grow up in Trinidad and Tobago. I came here when I was damn near 30, right? I didn't know nobody. I had no partnerships. I had no relationships. I didn't go to school with nobody. Nobody knew me. And here this foreigner comes with this, this foreigner comes and he starts talking about, this, that, and the third. It took a while for people to trust me. And I had to really learn what are the problems that people are having within our market. And how do I take my expertise and my experience and how do I apply that to our market? But again, Trinidad is a small place. So I did not want to limit myself to Trinidad. So all of my content over the years was always thinking Caribbean. How do I solve problems for the Caribbean region? And it was the best decision I made because the more I said Caribbean, other Caribbean countries could tap into my content and it makes sense for them. That generated opportunities for me Caribbean wide. And not just in the Caribbean region, but also in the Caribbean diaspora. It created a lot of opportunities for me in the Caribbean diaspora. And then to take it a step further, international companies who were looking to build a presence in the Caribbean would reach out to me to have conversations because they wanted my expertise and they wanted my experience on how I was able to transition from Canada to the Caribbean market. Because as we know, there is a major gap between international companies that come here and they might not live here, might not take the time to understand that every Caribbean country has its own identity, its own rules, laws, regulations, their own cultures, and every approach across the islands has to be different because everybody has different problems. For the most part, all of the companies that come to the Caribbean just think that, everything is like the U.S. or like Canada, the UK, and they kind of just come with that same approach. And it doesn't always work. For the most part, it doesn't. Just because, what they have access to and the strategies and the tools, it's all different abroad. And a lot of it needs to be tweaked for us here. And so because I was building this brand with Droid Island, and then as I transitioned from, from mobile specialist to, digital strategist, as I've made that transition, and my brand since I started was always Caribbean, it allowed me to generate opportunities across the Caribbean and the diaspora, and international companies would reach out to me and have these conversations with me because they wanted to get my experience and perspective on coming into the markets locally. All right. So that second step to the road to 100K has been brand positioning, building that brand, building that reputation. And that took a lot of trial and error. It took a lot of trial and error to craft that brand. And then the third part for me on that road to 100K is consistency. What you might not know is that there has never been a point since I started where I was like, I need a break. And a break in the sense of you don't hear from me for a month or 2 weeks. I have never gone on social media to say, hey, everybody, I'm taking a break. I'm going to be gone. I'm going to be off social media for 2 weeks or a month. You've never seen me come back and say, hey, guys, it's been a long time. I'm finally back. And you've never seen that. And it's because I've learned that in being consistent, that doesn't mean you need to be creating fresh content every single day. You see me every single day. Since 2016, you have seen me every single day with content. And it's because I learned that in creating content, as much as you are creating content, you need to have an even better repurposing strategy. You need to understand the benefits of creating evergreen content that lasts and stands the test of time, and then learning how to repurpose your content. Because that has saved me tremendously, because I'll tell you this, not every day I'm creating content, and not every day I'm in the mood to create content. There has been times where I have gone a week, 2 weeks without creating anything new. I've committed to a motto where I do one thing for my brand every single day. And many days that just might be repurposing content I've done in the past. And maybe I might tweak it. That blog that I've done might be a carousel. You know what I mean? Or even the blog or the carousel might be a short form video, might be a 30-second, 60-second video. And I'm not caught up on perfection. I believe that with more practice, you just get better over time. So I'm not hung up on things need to look and feel a certain way. I'm not hung up on that. I get it out and I put it out. And if I don't like it, I just know what to do different for next time. And just as time goes on, you just naturally become better at producing your content. And for me, even on the days I don't feel like creating, even if I have to repurpose and kind of reformat a piece of content, I'm kind of in autopilot because the content's already done. I'm just, saying, okay, you know what? Let me just take the 5 points I spoke about in this blog. Let me bang out a quick 60-second video and share. And that does its thing. And that takes maybe 5 minutes out of my day. But I did not have to research and stretch my brain or my capacity to come up with new content. So that consistency is because I focus 99% of my energy on creating evergreen content. I try not to do dated content. And even if the content is dated, I still try, like if the content is something that I know next week it's irrelevant, I still try to find an evergreen spin to it so that I could reshare this in 2 or 3 months and it still be relevant to this day. Like, give an example. Last episode, I spoke about Nadia Batson, right? And the merch. That concert happens on February 9th. If I were to let's just say I only did a video on just saying how bad, the e-commerce process was for that. It's irrelevant as soon as February 9th hits. It's irrelevant after I do it. But because I flipped it into a way where I'm teaching you about how to create merch through print on demand, that example is always going to be relevant because the solution is always going to be relevant. So when I reshare that content months down the line, you're going to see the example of what I was talking about, but then the solution is still going to be relevant to this day. And that consistency has allowed me to show up every single day since 2016 when I started Droid Island. There's never been a miss. I'm not creating every day, but I am repurposing and I'm creating organic content every single time that I create content and repurposing that. So you see me every single day. So there are people who have, when they see my brand, they're like, yo, this guy is the most consistent person I know because he doesn't skip. And when they think about content every single day, they're thinking about creating content every day, and that leads to burnout. And if you're burnt out, then you're going to fall off track when it comes to consistency because you're burnt out naturally. And so because I have been able to show up every single day, that has allowed me to consistently generate opportunities every single day. So step 1 to that 100K road is the base of skills that I've learned. Step 2 was the brand positioning, building my brand, building that reputation for being the guy who is, all things digital strategy, right? I built a business as a great example of how digital strategy can work to build a business as a solopreneur. So even when I was doing Droid Island and I was, selling the phones, I had my own store, doing all those things, I was still a solo act, right? And then that third was the consistency in the content. The consistency in the content through creating creating organic content that allowed me to repurpose the content, that allowed me to show up every single day for the last 6 years. That has put me on that path. And so the mix of products and services that I have where we have crossed the threshold is number 1, consulting. Because now that I've built up the portfolio, now that I have built up the skills, now that I have, shown the consistency, the first big deal that I've had of the year, and I'll talk about this later on, right? I'll talk about this in another episode. I'm gonna revisit this topic in 3 to 4 months, and it's gonna look and sound a bit different. But the first big deal that closed off this year, the first big one, and this one is a high percentage of the income. The first big deal, the director of the company said that they have been watching and learning from me for 2.5 years. They have been, actually, it's going on 3 years, because they started to follow me after they seen me from a conference in 2020. And I landed that conference, the conference that they attended, that they started to follow me from. That conference I got because I was doing so much work on, content marketing and digital strategy from 2018, 2019. The owners that booked me for that conference, they were following me for 2 years prior to that. All right? They booked me from things I've been doing for 2 years prior to booking me in 2020. And the owner, the board of directors for the company who have brought me on as the head of digital strategy for them, or the digital strategist consultant for them, they have signed off on our deal because one of the directors has been following me for 3 years, since 2020. And they're like, this is the person. We are at an intersection where we are rebuilding every single thing that we are doing. And you are the person who have shown over years that everything you do is what we need. So everything you are doing for your brand, we need you to do that with us. Right? We need you to help us do every single thing that you are doing for yourself. Every pop-up, every push notification, every single thing you are actively doing, we need that for us. All right? So like I started off the podcast by saying, you are paid in direct proportion to the difficulties of the problems you are solving. This company is a parent company with multiple brands underneath their belt. So we have a lot of work to do for all of these various brands. They understand that. They understand that their entire teams need to be brought into the 21st century of digital strategy. And they have the resources to make all of this happen. All right? That's just one deal. The second deal on the table that we have closed is a deal where the company says the exact same thing. They're like, hey, every single thing you are doing, we want to turn into workshops. And our clients, our members, our staff, everybody can attend the various workshops to learn every single thing that you are doing. And we have mapped out themes for every single month for the next year. And every weekend, we will have a 2-hour workshop. And again, details on that is going to be coming out very, very, very soon. But that deal was another big deal as a workshop facilitator. So the first deal was as a consultant. The second deal was as a workshop facilitator. And just those 2 deals alone almost put us at the 100K threshold. The third deal is a company who, and again, I will talk about more details, in another podcast, right? I have some NDAs in place. So there's a very fine line of what I can share and what I can say, but again, I try to give as much perspective as I can, because I want people to see how this can happen for you. And I want you to see that a solopreneur can do it. All right? The third deal is a deal where the company, again, Very, very big company, one of the biggest companies in the Caribbean, and their parent company is one of the largest companies in the world. That deal with the third company is for brand ambassador, content creator, workshop facilitator, and consultant. So there's multiple aspects of that deal. And that deal throws us over. It throws us over the 100K threshold. So those three alone, consulting, workshop facilitation, third, workshop, brand ambassador, content creator, one-on-one coach, 100K. But that's still just parts of what we are doing. Because then you have to keep in mind that I'm also a speaker. I'm also a paid speaker. I also facilitate workshops for a variety of companies and events. So while those are not long-term deals, they are still a part of my product and service offering. And so when I get booked for every single event, I charge in US. Or if a company locally in Trinidad is booking me, my fees are the US equivalent. Right? And so every event, every speaking gig, every workshop, these are paid parts of the Digipreneur ecosystem brand. So when you put all of these things together, when me and my lawyer sat down this week and we were just going over everything, she joked and she was like, do you think you could hit 500K? Like, do you think you could have a month, even if it's not consistent? Consistently, we are over the 100K. But do you think you could have a month this year where you do 500? And I laughed because I'm like, yo, as of right now, I don't think so. Like my mind hasn't worked out the path to a $500,000 month. My mind has not worked that out. But as much as we laughed about it, a year ago, my mind couldn't conceive how do we hit 100K in a month, let alone consistently. But now, a month where you hit 500, or a month where you at least hit at least a 200,000, because I like scaling down from 500. I mean, we said it as a joke, and I just laughed. I'm like, I don't even know how I would reach there, right? However, to temper those expectations, my mind easily went to, I don't think I could hit 500. I don't think I could have 1 month this year with 500. But I could hit 200. My mind has worked out how that could happen. Now, one question she asked me was, have you thought about burnout? Have you thought about, with everything on the table, are you stretching yourself too thin? Have you worked that out? And I thought about it, and I said, yes, I have thought about it. And because everything that I'm doing doesn't require me to work, and this is very important for everybody, everything that I'm doing, the largest deal on the table, only requires my physical presence 2 to 3 days a week. Only requires my presence for 2 to 3 days a week. And not all of those days are in person, because not everything I'm doing requires me to physically be there. So even in that engagement, it's hybrid. There are going to be days where I work from home, because what I have to do doesn't require me to be there, or it will require me to just liaise with the teams virtually, and then we can do our own thing. But the work I'd be doing, I'd be giving them my undivided attention in getting that stuff done. So if the largest engagement only requires that, if the second largest engagement requires me to be there once a week for 2 hours, and every single thing else I'm doing doesn't require my presence daily, like it might require me once or twice a month, even when I'm creating content, I do that on my own time. I do it on my own time, all right? Everything is structured so that I don't get burnt out. Because remember, you are paid in direct proportion to the difficulties of the problems that you solve, and you are not paid. And when you learn to be paid for your value and not your time, it changes everything. If you learn to be paid for your value and not your time, that changes everything. So when you find the right problems to solve for the right people, when you learn how to build your value and be paid for your value and not your time, that changes everything for you. And so when I broke that down and I explained everything to her as to how all of the deals are structured and what everything is going to require from me, she gave me the nod of approval and she said, brilliant. She's like, that's all I wanted to ensure before we sign off on everything. That we don't sign off on something that we can't fulfill. And then before you know it, the company is coming to, run us down legally and we got to go and defend it, right? So everything is structured with my own mental health, with my breaks. Everything has been thought out. So that is how I've been able to hit that milestone. And I can't wait for Carnival to finish because nothing starts until after Carnival. That's what's killing me. This is the first year I wish Carnival was done or didn't happen, because every single thing was like, okay, well, there's Carnival and, businesses, we're not going to be running at full capacity because of people and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, Jesus, Christmas. Cool, no problem. So everything starts from March. Like, Carnival for me, or February for me, is going to be a month of rest. Like, I'm not even partying. I'm not doing none of that. Like, I'm just going to be resting. I've already got booked for a couple of events. Not in Trinidad, thankfully, not in Trinidad, for February. And I'm just going to be focusing on, those events that I have coming up, and just resting and relaxing, and mentally starting to just get my mind for the rest of the year, because after that, the year looks very, very differently. So I wanted to, come on today's episode and talk about, can a solopreneur have consistent $100,000 months? Yes, they can. How do they do it? It's going to take time to build your skill set, to build your brand, to build that reputation. It's also going to take time to build that consistency, because the people who are going to be booking you for those 6-figure, 7-figure deals, whatever, they might take 2 years to close. They might take 3 years to close. They might need to be a fan of you for 3 years before they offer you that 6 or 7-figure deal. They're going to need to be a fan of you for a lengthy period of time and see what you are capable of. It doesn't happen overnight. Everything that is happening for me in 2023 is a direct result of everything I've started to do since September 2016, when I started Droid Island. Direct result. And I can see how every single deal that I'm signing off on is directly tied to specific events in my career journey. Like I said, the biggest deal, the managing director has been watching for 3 years, seen me at an event, and the event I got booked at was an event where the people that put on the event, they have been following me for 2+ years. So everything is connected. But that is how we can get to the 100K. And then don't forget, you still have, your content monetization. If you're selling, like there's still so many other revenues that there's still so many other streams of revenues that might not be as big, but they still contribute to your ecosystem of revenue streams. And so when you sit down and you add it all together, you'll realize that it's not as hard to get to 100K. It's not. I have a couple of friends where, they have 3 clients paying them 20 to 30K a month. And again, they're paid on their value and not their time. And so they're hitting $60,000, $70,000 easily. They're hitting $60,000, $70,000 easily because they've built their name, they've built their brand, they've honed it on the right skills, and they've been consistent, and they have showcased their journey, as they've been going along, and they're hitting those numbers. And so I wanted to just say that it is possible and kind of give you a breakdown as to how, for myself, I have reached to this point. And now there's just no going back. Because the minute you achieve that milestone and you know what it takes to get there, you're only going to build up on there. And who knows, maybe in 2 years I might find one client that pays me $100,000 a month versus, it being stretched out between 3 or 4 companies. But it can happen. So that's today's episode. Can a solopreneur make $100,000 a month? Yes, they can. I gave you a bit of some insights as to how it's happening for me. All right. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate the podcast. Please, if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, just rate the podcast. Hit the 5-star system. Drop a rating. Those tremendously help to continue to grow the podcast. If you really enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to drop a review. The reviews help to grow the Digipreneur FM family across the world. Everybody looks at the reviews of the podcast before they listen. So please do me a favor, drop a review if you truly enjoyed the podcast. If you want to follow me over on social media, you can do so at Keron Rose, KeronRosc on all social media platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Follow me over there. I enjoy creating content and engaging with you on those social media platforms, all right? That is it for me today, folks. It is a Thursday, so that's our second episode for the week, and we're going to see you next week with another brand new episode of the Digipreneur FM podcast. Thank you for listening. Enjoy your weekend, and take care.
You've been listening to the Digiboss, Keron Rose. We hope your notepad was filled after this episode. Make sure to like, rate, and review the show. The learning doesn't stop, folks. And to make sure you don't miss any gems from the Digiboss, go over and follow him on all social media platforms at Keron Rose. Folks, don't just sit there with a notepad. We need you to implement at least one thing into your business before the next episode. That's the only way your business levels up. Thanks for listening to Digipreneur FM. Now go be great.